Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty fascinating, multi-layered piece by Michael Thompson over at the Falsely Accused Network blog. It's called The Modern Dating Paradox: Why Young Men Are Opting Out. Now, no matter where you stand on modern social dynamics, this gives us a really structured look how human connection is shifting and exactly why an entire demographic seems to be, well, hitting the pause button on romance.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the modern dating paradox itself, then move through transactional culture, the social skills gap, assessing dating risks, the family law argument, and finally, wrap up with a proposed path forward. Let's get right to it.
All right, Section 1, the modern dating paradox. And we're kicking this off with a pretty startling piece of data from a recent New York Post article.
Just look at this jump. The number of single young men under 30 skyrocketed from 51% in 2019 to 63% in 2023. I mean, that is a massive 12% increase in literally just 4 years. And Thompson argues that this isn't just about, COVID isolation or guys simply having high expectations. No, he suggests there is something much more profound happening right beneath the surface here.
Moving on to Section 2, transactional culture and apps. Let's look at how the modern digital era has totally rewired how we actually form bonds.
There's a quote here from a 28-year-old teacher, Ian Breslow, who says modern dates feel more like job interviews. And honestly, that paints a pretty stark picture, doesn't it? People are being instantly assessed for their utility. It's like, what can you do for me, and where exactly is this going? It feels way less about finding a genuine spark and more like you should have brought your resume and professional references to happy hour.
The author points out that natural relationship milestones have basically been compressed into this hyper-efficient screening process. Instead of focusing on genuine human connection, it's all about assessment. Imagine sitting down for a first-aid coffee and getting grilled about your preferences for, say, a future kid's schooling. Sure, it might be pragmatic, but the article argues it turns dating into an emotionally exhausting, unsustainable interview. And, of course, dating apps really crank this up a notch. Andrew Bruno notes here that apps are the central means for meeting people today, but they require this grueling, weeks-long prerequisite of messaging just to get a foot in the door. Thompson argues that, by design, these platforms reduce incredibly complex human beings to just a couple of photos and bullet points. It ends up rewarding highly practiced presentation skills way more than the kind of spontaneous authenticity that usually builds lasting relationships.
Which brings us to Section 3, the social skills gap. This dives into a widespread but honestly underdiscussed post-pandemic reality.
So, what is the social skills gap? The source defines it as the actual deterioration of social capabilities after prolonged isolation. Think about it. A lot of young adults spent their absolute most critical socialization years in lockdown, and that basically stunted the exact skills you need to form meaningful romantic connections today. It's essentially social muscle atrophy.
And this creates a really frustrating, vicious cycle. You have difficulty initiating connections, right? That leads to having fewer social interactions overall, which then results in further diminished social capabilities. Thompson points out that for a lot of young men, the effort required to overcome this specific deficit just feels completely insurmountable, especially when you weigh it against a highly uncertain outcome.
Now let's turn to Section 4, assessing dating risks, because the underlying issues go a lot deeper than just feeling a little socially awkward.
Thompson poses a huge question here. Are we looking at a dating landscape driven by bilateral fear? Now, he's very clear that women have entirely legitimate safety concerns when dating, and those absolutely shouldn't be diminished. But his argument is that the fear now swings both ways. Social interactions are getting so heavily scrutinized and potentially weaponized that both sides are basically operating constantly on edge.
Because of this, the author argues that a lot of men are just concluding that the potential rewards aren't worth the risks. A misinterpreted intention or a messy relationship conflict isn't just a bad date anymore. It carries this heavy fear of reputational jeopardy, professional jeopardy, and even legal jeopardy. And that intense risk calculation, the article suggests it's a massive driver behind that 63% single statistic we saw earlier. All right, moving to Section 5, the family law argument. This is probably the most specific layer of the Falsely Accused Network's thesis. Here, Thompson explicitly points to perceived bias in family courts as the white elephant in the room. The source argues that family law structurally favors women, which results in a bad deal for men. Now, whether you personally agree or disagree with that, the core argument he's making is that this perception alone acts as a massive deterrent for young men who might otherwise consider long-term commitment.
Which finally brings us to Section 6, a proposed path forward. So, how does the author suggest we shift from just pointing out problems to actually creating sustainable change?
Thompson lays out 5 specific steps to move us beyond this cycle of binary blame. First, recognize that efficient dating isn't always effective dating. Second, we need to create low-pressure, organic social spaces. Third, develop better communication models for setting boundaries. Fourth, actively acknowledge the legitimate safety concerns of women and the systemic concerns of men. And fifth, acknowledge those family court dynamics. His whole premise here is that young men aren't just uniformly rejecting relationships for no reason, they're actually responding very cautiously to a dramatically altered landscape.
He wraps it up with this powerful thought that this 63% statistic isn't just some localized dating crisis. It is, in his words, a canary in the coal mine, signaling deeper shifts in how we connect as human beings. Ultimately, we are looking at a symptom of profound underlying societal shifts in human interaction, in trust, and in structural fairness. So that leaves us with a pretty vital question to chew on. Are we, as a society, actually willing to address these underlying systems and bilateral fears to rebuild a healthier relationship culture? Can we look past the symptoms to forge a genuinely authentic path forward for human connection? It's definitely something to think about.